Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to a very special VMware Tanzu webinar on VMware Tanzu Mission Control. Today, we're joined by two very special speakers. I'll bring them in now. We have Carol Pereira and Joe Mann. Thank you guys for joining us today. Awesome. So before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items that we'd like to cover. First, we'd love to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions for us, please submit them below using the Ask a Questions tab, and we'll get to your questions throughout today's presentation. In addition, leave us feedback. Let us know how we did, how we're doing, or what you'd like to hear at future events by hitting the Rate This tab also below the presentation screen. You'll also notice a lot of attachments that are relevant to today's presentation that are available in the Attachments tab. So feel free to download them as you go throughout today's presentation. We'll also note them at the end as well. So without further ado, send it off to today's speakers.
Thanks, AJ. Thank you all for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. We're here to talk about a secure Kubernetes control plane for air-gapped environments and sovereign clouds. So this is our offering called Tanzu Mission Control, and we'll go over Tanzu Mission Control's main features, benefits, and a few customer success stories too. But before that, we want to review the challenges that customers face when they're modernizing applications and leveraging multi-cloud. We'll also talk about the challenges that the regulated industries face around data security, which is probably the main reason why you're here today. We're talking about the launch of our new self-managed deployment type, which is perfect for, again, those air-gapped environments that highly regulated industries need. And if they partner with a sovereign cloud, that's also, a target for us with that new offering of Tanzu Mission Control. So those challenges of modernizing applications, leveraging multi-cloud, which include sovereign clouds, those challenges are driving customers to explore Tanzu solutions for that simplified and consistent approach to container management. So let's get started. And let me tell you that VMware is here to help customers run more apps on more clouds. And we see three main strategies in the market today. Customers modernizing data centers with virtualization when they use vSphere and start in the path of being able to use Tanzu solutions. Second are those customers who are refactoring applications through cloud migration and container technology. So they're essentially breaking those monolith apps apart, rewriting them to use microservices, which increase flexibility and agility. With that change, they can, of course, update, a single service that is part of an app much more quickly. Those updates can be weekly instead of, having to mess around with much more complex code structure full of dependencies of those legacy applications. And lastly, we have those customers who are already invested in a cloud native approach where applications take full advantage of containers, microservices, cloud services from the start. So those are potentially startups, companies that are, recent and already start with a cloud native approach. All these three strategies may be used together depending on the company. And no matter what is your particular situation or focus, if you're here because you have responsibilities for IT operations or application development, we know that organizations want to make future-proof choices about their infrastructure. So from virtualization to the cloud, companies are modernizing their apps from monoliths to microservices, and distributed environments now become a reality. Those microservices run on containers, which require container orchestration solutions such as Kubernetes. And adopting Kubernetes brings multiple benefits to companies, even outside of IT. We saw recently in our State of Kubernetes report that people mentioned growth in market share, new revenue streams, higher profit margin. But the reality is that containers increase complexity for IT teams. Before containers, developers would compile, inspect, and commit. Their applications will be pushed to production by the operations team, and that team will handle all of the infrastructure. Today, developers sometimes need to know a bit about Kubernetes to get by, but also we see the rise of platform engineering teams who are looking to better support those developers with, again, a simplified but flexible path to production based on Kubernetes. And the path to production may look a little bit like this, so it's not all smooth sailing as Kubernetes footprint grows. If you're manually managing clusters, your worldview is multiple screens, multiple clusters, cluster consoles, just to assign one row binding and then have to go back and do it all over again if you need to update that access. So manual management can be both time consuming and error prone. So you must automate all of the things to improve operational efficiencies and reduce those errors that come with everything being manual. And as companies move to public cloud, private cloud, sovereign clouds, they see more silos. Each cloud has a different Kubernetes implementation. If companies are using a sovereign cloud but get pushed to use also AWS because of particular services that public cloud offers, they will start to face the challenges of a distributed environment where things can grow out of hand, too many disparate services and tools, which create a lot of friction and lands customers into what we call the cloud chaos. So, what are the main challenges that companies are facing with multi-cloud? You can see here the three top challenges that are trending up from past years. Number one is the inadequate internal experience and expertise, hence why purchasing a Kubernetes management platform like Tanzu Mission Control could be a good idea for some companies as opposed to doing it yourself. Number two, security. Security is also always a big challenge that we see year in and out every time. Um, so challenge in meeting those security and compliance requirements. We can solve that with Tanzu Mission Control with our robust policy engine. So again, it's a control plane that will offer you that robust policy engine, data protection capabilities, not to mention the main reason why we're here today, which is our self-managed deployment, which offers, again, that support for air-gapped environments that need that extra security. Those companies that are in regulated industries and cannot take advantage of a SaaS type of offering. And number three, difficulty to manage clusters, life cycles, and upgrades. So that is one of the reasons why we prioritize developing a truly multi-cloud solution. So our SaaS offering of Tanzu Mission Control already offers support for lifecycle management of clusters in public clouds, such as EKS on Amazon and AKS on Azure. As a side note, we know that not every enterprise uses public clouds. We know that some organizations are adding private cloud and on-premises infrastructure to their mix. But Tanzu Mission Control still provides great value to those companies too. You don't have to be multi-cloud. You just have to have more than one cluster and not want to do all the manual work. So digging a bit into the challenges that the regulated industries face, we can see that most are related to data locality and compliance. Meta was recently fined over $1 billion for violating data sovereignty regulations because they transferred user data from the European Union to the United States. So again, this is a huge deal that really impacts organizations. Regulated industries can be multi-cloud, but not all public clouds may satisfy their, again, data sovereignty requirements. If they can't guarantee that data remains within a country or region, they don't meet the requirements. So that's when sovereign clouds are a good answer. So Tanzu Mission Control is a centralized hub for Kubernetes management, and that self-managed version that we recently launched allow for, again, the deployment on air-gapped environments. So it's a solution that also our VMware sovereign cloud partners can offer within their countries. As we see on the slide here, financial services organizations need to speed service delivery and optimize payment processing, all without compromising cybersecurity. Healthcare organizations must protect patient data, but also need to boost the quality of patient care while coping with mergers and acquisitions and preventing data loss. And lastly, the public sector heavily prioritizes data security and also protections against cyber criminals, espionage, but they also need to modernize their apps and transform their processes for continued innovation. So the question is, how do those organizations ensure security and bring consistency to operations within their Kubernetes environments across diverse distributed environments? So Tanzu for Kubernetes operations is a comprehensive solution that supports platform teams with multi-cluster Kubernetes management, which is brought to you by Tanzu Mission Control, the star of the show today. But it also offers service mesh, load balancer, and observability. But for today, we will focus on Tanzu Mission Control only, which is that Kubernetes management piece. And it provides global visibility and automation for operational tasks such as cluster provisioning, lifecycle management, identity and access management, security policies, data protection, and more. No matter where your Kubernetes clusters are running, again, on premises, on vSphere environments, in a public cloud, at the edge, on sovereign clouds, Tanzu Mission Control offers that centralized policy management, which gives operators the control that they need, consistent clusters, increasing DevOps velocity, and self-service access to those clusters so developers can focus on building great apps. So starting with taking control of your Kubernetes environment, I'll touch on our cluster lifecycle management capabilities. So today, in our SaaS version, we support the direct provisioning of Tanzu, EKS, and AKS clusters. And that includes the ability to create, update, upgrade, and delete those clusters. In other words, manage their lifecycle. So this supports customers who are familiar with either AWS Cloud or Azure Cloud. So they can have more choices and less friction as they use Tanzu Mission Control to gain velocity with that centralized tool. Other than provisioning those types of clusters, any operator can also attach a cloud native foundation conforming cluster and manage them with policies. So again, Tanzu Mission Control supports that you add your Rancher, OpenShift clusters, again, any cloud native foundation conforming cluster. And you can apply policies. And that is true for the self-managed deployment option too. And it's something that differentiates our offering from others that are more opinionated in the market. So the only real difference from clusters that are attached and not provisioned is the lifecycle management piece. So as you see here, everything listed is applicable for both provision and attached clusters, except for the red X mark for the lifecycle management. But you still have, as I mentioned, policies, data protection, and continuous delivery. Those are all included for the attached clusters too. And speaking of continuous delivery, our GitOps capabilities improve efficiency and automation for platform teams. This is the view of our continuous delivery tab inside a cluster, where customers can leverage our integration with FluxCD to increase consistency in cluster provisioning and management. So clusters and cluster groups can inherit configurations based on YAML artifacts that are stored in the Git repository and connected to Tanzu Mission Control. So defining that single source of truth in the Git repo and reusing those YAML artifacts removes what we call ClickOps frustration. It avoids configuration drift and, again, reduces human errors. For customers on the SaaS version, we also have features around package management, which includes access to the Bitnami catalog of Helm charts. Again, this expands choice and simplifies package installation with a few clicks for them. And now for increased security, this is a view of the policies area, and you can see the robust engine that includes policies for access, image registry, network traffic, quota, and security. There are out-of-the-box policies with variable levels of strictness. And recently, we also added mutation policies, which updates or mutates a request as determined by the platform team. So developers don't have to worry about security. They won't get a validation error. The platform itself will normalize to what the platform operator defined as the way to run. They will mutate the request, if you say. So lastly, we also have powerful data protection capabilities, which are powered by Valero, an open source project. And it allows for the backup and restore of entire clusters or partial clusters across clouds and environments. It also offers the choice of CSI snapshot, which is more current and crash consistent, perfect for databases or data processing pipeline, or file system backup for applications that don't support that snapshot capability. So snapshot is something that we recently launched. We also had a webinar about it last week. If you're interested in that data protection piece, you can go back to our webinars. We had one late June. And it's something that is, again, caring for those stateful volumes, right? Stateful applications that you may be running on your Kubernetes environments. And we support for storage targets, both, Amazon S3 and Azure Blob. So why Tanzu Mission Control for your Kubernetes environments? Because first, you can take control of those environments with global visibility. So if you have multiple Kubernetes clusters and continues to grow your footprint out of control, this is for you. You can improve efficiency with templates and GitOps. Again, if you deal with many clusters or teams to support, automating cluster configuration is very valuable. And you can use GitOps to define how a cluster should look like, including packages to be deployed to it, like monitoring or any analytics tools. And last but not least, you can increase security with policies and data protection. If you need to give different access to different teams, there's a construct of cluster groups and also namespaces, workspaces in Tanzu Mission Control, where you can apply those guardrails for access. Now I'll show you a few customer stories and a quick Tanzu Labs services overview that you can review later once you get this deck. And then after that, I will go back to our launch of the self-managed offering. So the first story that we have here is Drax, a renewable energy company that needed to modernize their infrastructure to become carbon negative by 2030. And they moved from POC to production pretty quickly with Tanzu Mission Control, leveraging specifically Tanzu Mission Control for all of their needs when implementing new ways of managing their Kubernetes clusters. Another customer is in the auto industry, and they needed to adopt agile practices. They were trying to modernize three of their apps while also cutting infrastructure costs. So they reduced VMs and CPU cores and moved to a containerized environment. And lastly, a global leader in food operations that needed to accelerate their GPU workloads at the edge in their plants. So they were leveraging data and AI to increase food safety and also improve working conditions with cameras, monitoring, working staff, and the processes that they need to accomplish. Here's a view of our Tanzu Lab services, which include great offerings such as activation services to help with deployment, acceleration services to drive feature adoption and usage, and RPM, Rapid Portfolio Modernization, which helps you get more applications onto your platform and realize more value. Now let's talk about the self-managed version of Tanzu Mission Control. This solution caters to customers and partners with data sovereignty concerns who must abide by local regulations and already potentially use a sovereign cloud partner. Also distributed, those who have distributed Kubernetes environments. So they have local stores, plants, or clinics that need to operate with limited connectivity. And lastly, those who are focusing on building a sovereign cloud. As part of the VMware Cloud Provider Program, we have many partners that are indeed building a sovereign cloud, and now they can take advantage of Tanzu Mission Control. The solution, again, focuses on air-gapped deployments, and it was released in late June in its 1.0 version. So on the attachments, you can see links to blogs and other announcements that you can peruse through and download. And here's a look at the comparison chart where you see that the initial release has some differences from what we offer today on SaaS, mainly lifecycle management for multi-cloud environments, integration with other Tanzu offerings like observability and service mesh. But what it does focus on are Tanzu environments and our robust policy engine, automation capabilities, and data protection capabilities. So if those broad themes are of interest to you, policies, automation, data protection, this is a good offering. And now I'll hand it over to Joe to cover the solution in more details.
Thanks, Carol. My name is Joe Mann. I'm a product line manager on the Tanzu Mission Control product team. Specifically, I have been leading the initiative to release TMC self-managed. As Carol mentioned, that went GA in a 1.0 version in late June. And while we're on this slide, I want to talk a little bit about why we do have kind of differences between the features and the functionality that are available across the two deployment models. Because what we've done with TMC self-managed, we've intended to simply create a new deployment model for the product, not so much a net new product in general. But there are really two factors that inform what features and functionality are available in self-managed versus what's available in the SaaS deployment model. So first of all, there are obviously going to be certain features and functionality that are dependent on other SaaS services. Top of mind, those are Tanzu Service Mesh, ARIA Observability for applications. Those are integrations we have built in with TMC in the SaaS deployment model. And those services are also other SaaS services. So in our early releases, we're kind of having a blanket position of turning off other integrations with other SaaS services. That's one topic, so to speak, which is what features are actually relevant in the TMC self-managed use case where customers are going to deploy this in their own data centers, in their own kind of, isolated VPCs, so to speak. So the other part of that conversation is that with a SaaS product where we, VMware, kind of manage the entire stack, so to speak, we have kind of complete control on when and how we turn features and functionality on and off. So we don't have a versioning with SaaS. We can introduce a new feature and turn it on dynamically as we want. We don't have to worry about compatibility across versions of TMC, so to speak. But when we move to a package deployment model, we have to ship releases, we have to ship minor releases, patch releases that are essentially frozen in time. And so as features roll into SaaS, we have to integrate them into TMC self-managed. We have to test them. We have to ensure that the design as it exists of the functionality in TMC SaaS from an engineering perspective is the same or similar in self-managed, and then test that as well. So we are beholden in TMC self-managed to a versioning strategy, and so we have code freezes where we have to cut our release, and inevitably there will be features and functionality that roll into TMC SaaS during our code freeze for a particular version. So a good example of this here is EKS lifecycle management. the ability to provision and manage EKS clusters via Tanzu Mission Control was released back in, I believe, late April or early May of this year. And so our code complete date for TMC Self-Managed 1.0 was around the same time. So we did not have the runway to adopt the EKS LCM technology for our 1.0 release. So we imagine and we intend to introduce that in our first minor release. So what that means for our customers is that when you see a feature turn on in TMC SaaS, generally it should be available if relevant for the self-managed deployment model in the following quarter. So we intend in a minor release, and we intend to ship minor releases that introduce new features and functionality in every quarter. So on the screen here, EKS LCM is one that we are focusing on, and I'll talk a little bit about our minor release planning shortly, as well as the ability to bring in Helm chart application deployment directly from TMC self-managed as well. That's something that is readily available in the SaaS deployment model, and something that we will include in our next minor release also. So let's take a step back a little bit and talk about kind of first the historical context of Tanzu Mission Control, or TMC in general. So I have spent the majority of my career as a solution architect or sales engineer in the field. I've worked with, spent a lot of time with Red Hat, about 7 years at Red Hat, 2.5 years at AWS, 2.5 years at VMware prior to this stint, and then have been in this PM role a little over a year now. And from my previous time at VMware, when TMC was first released, the first question that we would get from the field is, and from our customers is, okay, well, when are we going to get a non-SaaS deployment model? When are we going to get something for our regulated customers, our customers that are running in network restricted environments, our anti-SaaS customers, to be able to take advantage of this multi-cluster control plane management solution? And up until recently, about a year ago, the answer was we're not going to do it. We don't have plans. It's not on our roadmap. So about this time last year, it was officially prioritized and funded. You know, to put it bluntly, the number of customers that were asking for these features and functionality in a air-gapped or network restricted environment got too large to ignore. And so we've been working on building the self-managed deployment model for TMC for about a year. As I mentioned, we GA'd about a month ago at this point. And so we have kind of several tenets that we focus on, you know, during the course of the initiative. And first and foremost, the kind of the lowest common denominator, so to speak, is support of air-gapped deployments. And so what we mean there is that this solution should be able to be installed and deployed and then utilized in an ongoing fashion in an air-gapped environment without any sort of dependency on an external internet connection. And so we deliver an installation artifact that includes all of the resources required to stand this solution up and install it, as well as utilize it to deploy and manage clusters without any outbound or inbound connectivity required. So generally, our customers that can't use TMC in the SaaS form factor have issues with allowing network connectivity in or out of their environment. And so we know not all customers are going to be running this in air-gapped environments, but as I mentioned, that's kind of the lowest common denominator that we're working on as far as deployment models. Secondly, I've already touched on this a little bit, but we want the look and feel of self-managed, the UX, the UI, to be extremely similar, if not almost exactly the same as what we have in TMC SaaS. And, you know, the main reason is that we want customers that are already experienced with TMC SaaS, but maybe have more restrictive environments where SaaS is not a fit. You know, if they want to use self-managed, we want their, you know, end users to be familiar with how the product works. We want them to be able to utilize TMC self-managed just as they have with SaaS without having to kind of relearn the playbook, so to speak. And then, you know, to take that a step further, API and UI compatibility across the two deployment models enables our customers to reuse automation. So if they're using the Terraform provider to automate and orchestrate workflows in TMC SaaS today, if those same workflows are available and self-managed, then the Terraform provider will be able to support those workflows and that automation as well. So being able to reuse and pivot automation over to the self-managed platform and vice versa. If we have customers that haven't really jumped in with TMC yet because it's only SaaS, they start with self-managed, and then once they adopt the product and integrate the workflows, they realize, hey, we have some less restrictive environments where we can utilize a SaaS service. You know, it works both ways. We want that compatibility, that familiarity with the solution from a UX and a UI perspective to translate across the stack. And then lastly, you know, as far as the historical context goes, VMware up to this point, we didn't really have and provide a story or a solution for customers that needed to manage and operate Kubernetes clusters at scale if they couldn't use a SaaS solution. So it was either TMC SaaS or, you know, we'll work with you to kind of build a strategy that's it revolves around maybe CLI scripting, you know, manual workflows. We didn't have a replacement for TMC SaaS for customers that needed to be, you know, isolated or on-prem exclusively. And so being able to bring cluster LCM functionalities, cluster LCM at scale functionalities, fleet management at scale. So I love the slide that Carol used earlier when, you know, we generally talk about TMC with respect to managing, you know, anybody can manage and deploy one or maybe even two clusters. But as you're starting to deploy 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, 40, being able to have kind of a unified policy system, you know, a unified backup and recovery strategy across the clusters, the managed clusters is critical in being able to scale your operation. So to apply a policy to a group of clusters, a group of 10 or 20 clusters via TMC is fairly straightforward. To architect and implement that same policy manually from cluster 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is where we start to see challenges for our customers. So being able to introduce that fleet management at scale, operations and functionality to our customers is that customers in air gapped and network restricted environments and regulated industries is really critical. So we'll share these slides out. I know this architecture diagram can be a bit of an eye chart, but I share this in sessions like this so we can, you know, I can be crystal clear with the audience that this TMC self-managed is essentially delivered as, you know, a Kubernetes native application. The TMC application itself runs on top of a Kubernetes cluster. And in case of 1.0, it needs to be a Tanzu Kubernetes grid or TKG cluster. So TMC self-managed will run on any supported TKG version, whether it's the standalone management cluster or the integrated Tanzu services that's natively a part of vSphere. We just need one workload cluster to get started to support this service. Most of our customers are deploying this onto an existing shared services cluster. But we essentially have kind of a set of prerequisites that need to be in place to support the application deployment. And so the first and foremost, we need a TKG workload cluster to actually support the application. So we need that in place. We also need, for 1.0, an OIDC compliant identity provider. And so in the TMC SaaS world, we federate identity into Tanzu Mission Control via the VMware Cloud Service Portal, which is another SaaS solution that's connected and integrated with TMC SaaS. In the self-managed world, we obviously don't have those integrations with the other SaaS services like the Cloud Service Portal. So we need a method to allow our customers to bring in their existing identity providers to be able to federate access to their dev teams, to be able to assign RBAC permissions within the solution, to be able to access and log into the solution in general. And so we're using our open source sponsored solution, Pinniped, as the identity broker, which will attach on to an OIDC compliant identity provider such as Okta or Keycloak or Dex or Auth0 or similar solutions. Now for 1.0, it has to run through an OIDC compliant, excuse me, identity provider. One of the top priorities for our next minor release 1.1 is to integrate directly with Active Directory and Open LDAP. So we've gotten early feedback that the OIDC requirement for some of our customers is a bit challenging, as they don't have a solution like that in place. But almost everyone has Active Directory and Open LDAP. So we're going to pivot to directly support that as part of the installation. So if you have an existing LDAP or Active Directory server, you can plug those credentials in during the install and then federate that identity directly into TMC. And once the identity is plugged into TMC, I believe Carol showed a screenshot of the policy engine. The access policy engine will allow the TMC admin to kind of assign, granular RBAC access to various resources in under control of TMC. And whether that's kind of giving someone a read-only view of all the clusters, giving them a cluster admin, RBAC, cluster admin role binding, cluster role binding for a specific cluster, and kind of everything in between. So that's one of the biggest values of TMC, is being able to federate access and have really fine-grained control over RBAC configuration across all the resources that are managed, all the way down to the namespace level. The third prerequisite is really not required for installation, but if customers want to utilize the data protection feature in TMC, which is backup and recovery of workload clusters, there needs to be some sort of S3 compatible blob storage, whether that's AWS S3 directly or something like MinIO, or a lot of the NetApp and storage hardware vendors have S3 compatible API support nowadays anyways. TMC, this is the same, the same is true in the SaaS world, but TMC needs some sort of object store to store the cluster backups. And so in order to do data protection workflows in TMC self-managed, we need some sort of S3 compatible blob storage. And then lastly, we need an OCI compliant image registry. So in most cases on the VMware side, we're utilizing Harbor, which is our open source sponsored container registry community. As this application is powered by a set of microservices, those services running on the cluster need container images to support the deployment of the services. And then when clusters are created or brought under management of TMC, there are some additional container images that are installed on the managed clusters that allow it to communicate with the TMC control plane. And so all of those container images need to live somewhere within this environment. So when the service is initially installed, the Kubernetes cluster can pull the required container images to set the solution up. For 1.0, we're taking a batteries included approach when it comes to the installation. We are providing stateful services in the MinIO for internal object store purposes, Kafka for messaging services, and then Postgres as a database. And as we mature, as our customers mature their usage and deployment, we'll work with our customers to understand when and where we start to allow customers to bring their own stateful services into the solution. But our idea for 1.0 is we knew we already had a significant list of prerequisites that are required. And so we wanted to take, a little bit more off of our customers' plates in order to support the deployment. So the basic installation flow is CLI-led, Tanzu CLI-led, very similar to what we have today with TAP. But we're also working with the VMware Cloud and service provider team to introduce an integration with VMware Cloud Director. So VCD will basically facilitate the deployment of Tanzu Mission Control and integrate directly with VMware Cloud Director to provide multi-tenant access to TMC. So that's something that's coming towards the end of the second half of the year for our cloud and service provider customers and partners that utilize VMware Cloud Director. And this is especially relevant for those service providers in the EMEA region, where the sovereign cloud movement is top of mind. So they are customers coming to them for services. need to be able to ensure that their data is residing within region. And so the SaaS service as it exists with TMC does not fit the bill. So now our providers can deploy those solutions and utilize TMC without having to have a concern about where the data is living. So we talked a little bit about what's on the truck for 1.0, and I want to reiterate that with this slide. So we're basically in 1.0, we're introducing what I like to call kind of the base functionality of Tanzu Mission Control as it exists today. So lifecycle management of all supported TKG clusters. So the ability to create, scale, delete, update TKG clusters. We're also supporting the ability to attach any CNCF compliant Kubernetes clusters. I'll talk about it again in a little bit, but Carol already covered kind of the difference between the LCM and attached functionality. But essentially what this means is that, you know, if customers have an OpenShift cluster or a Rancher cluster or a DIY upstream Kubernetes cluster, they can attach those clusters, those existing clusters to TMC to get you know, all the features and functionality of Tanzu Mission Control, like we see on the screen. So being able to apply security policy and guardrails, being able to manage and create namespaces, being able to deploy packages from the application catalog, backup and recovery with data protection, conformance scans with inspections, and then continuous delivery with the Flux controller. So all of those features and functionality are available. The main difference is that we don't support LCM of those clusters because TMC doesn't understand how the OpenShift cluster was created or how the AKS cluster was created. Now, EKS will soon kind of flip over to the registered or LCM side of the house in the self-managed world, and has already done so in the SaaS world. But just kind of a point of clarity on, you know, the value of Tanzu Mission Control self-managed for clusters other than the VMware TKG distribution, so to speak. The policy engine is basically an exact copy of what we have in TMC SaaS for TMC self-managed. So the ability to set network policy for ingress and egress of network traffic in your managed applications. The ability to assign and control RBAC access to the solution and to resources that TMC manages. So the basic functionality on the access management side is that a customer, say a TMC admin deploys TMC self-managed, and then they decide they have a team of developers that should only get access to a certain set of clusters. So that TMC admin would create a cluster group, would either provision new clusters and assign them to that cluster group, or attach existing clusters and assign them to that cluster group. And then the TMC admin would then apply certain access policies and grant that group of developers or that single developer access, a certain level of access to that cluster group. And so what that means is when I, as the developer, log into TMC, I only see those resources. I don't see the other 60 clusters that my admin is managing. I only see the 4 clusters that they created just for me. So that story is exactly the same across the 2 deployment models. Inspection and conformance testing, backup and recovery, and then application catalog with the Tanzu standard application catalog is available. And then we'll be introducing Helm support for deploying Helm applications to clusters in 1.1. That's our intention, at least. So as we shift to look at what's coming in 1.1, which will probably be, you know, October, November timeline of this year, LCM of EKS clusters. So this is kind of in the bucket of bringing in existing functionality in SaaS that wasn't available when we released a previous version. So we're going to pull EKS LCM support in. We're going to introduce direct integration with Active Directory and Open LDAP, as I mentioned earlier. So this will allow for users and customers to integrate directly with their underlying Active Directory or LDAP directory services without having to utilize an OIDC broker in between. And we have a big bucket that's just installation experience improvement. This is a very robust service that has a lot of moving parts. And so we've learned a lot in the beta, private beta, in the first month of GA for how we can improve on the install experience from our customers and internal field teams that are testing this. So that's high on our list, as well as Helm chart support, as I already mentioned. We'll skip through these. We already covered this. Yeah, so one of the things that we will talk about, and I mentioned earlier, is that there are kind of two broader use cases. One is what we kind of refer to as the large enterprise use case, and that's where a customer has or has the need for a solution like TMC to manage and broker access to Kubernetes clusters for their internal organization. So I'm a part of the infrastructure or platform engineering team. I'm setting up Tanzu Mission Control to federate access and control policies for my developers. So my customers are kind of internal to this in this scenario. The other use case that we're addressing is on the back of the integration with VMware Cloud Director as part of the VMware Cloud and Service Provider portfolio. So VMware Cloud Director is essentially a cloud portal that creates a multi-tenant experience for built on top of underlying vSphere infrastructure. So basically, a cloud provider will build a vSphere cluster. They'll install VCD and then assign kind of compute as a service or infrastructure as a service resources to their customer. So customer comes to service provider A and says, I need 10 VMs to install my application on. The cloud provider will create that kind of quota in VCD, and the customer logs into VCD directly to access and interact with their services. So even though they're running on vSphere, the customer never touches vSphere directly. They're using VCD as kind of an abstraction layer to access the underlying resources. And we're working with that team to kind of have TMC sit at that same level. So a customer that accesses VCD that has a provider that has enabled the TMC service will be able to SSO over from VCD to their TMC portal to then manage and control their Kubernetes clusters. So this is where we'll have multiple customers using kind of a single instantiation of Tanzu Mission Control. And that multi-tenancy is really powered by the underlying VCD identity management service. So each customer brings their own underlying identity solution, plugs it into VCD, and then VCD translates that and passes it along to Tanzu Mission Control. So now TMC sits in this stack and gives our partners the ability to offer not only infrastructure as a service, but Kubernetes as a service as well. So handing that functionality, turning that kind of catalog item on for their customers and kind of building Kubernetes as a service offerings. So I think for the last couple of slides, I might hand it back over to Carol to walk through some of the additional content that I believe we'll share this presentation out, but I believe most of these attachments are shared directly in the attachment section of the webinar as well.
Yeah, that's correct, Joe. So you see the links here to our product page. There's a link to documentation, installing and running Tanzu Mission Control self-managed. There's a webinar series link. So we are having a few webinars this year. You see that series with the first 3 webinars to watch. We have updated our overview video on YouTube. It's a short, 2-minute video that covers most of our functionality. And there's also Tanzu Tech Zone, which has a lot of articles from experts, a lot of blogs, explainer content, how-to content. So make sure to visit the Tech Zone too for more in-depth content. And I think I'll hand it over to AJ for any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Joe, for today's presentation. Most of all, thanks to all of you guys for joining us. We do have some time for some questions, and I know we have a few that already have been sent over. So we'll start with those. But if you have any questions, continue to submit them using the Ask the Questions tab. And before we get started, if you want to let us know how we did, hit the Rate This tab also below the presentation screen, which I think some folks have already left us some feedback. So the first question here is, can I test drive Tanzu Mission Control?
Yeah, AJ, thanks. The question, can you test drive Tanzu Mission Control? Absolutely. So much like TKG or Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, OVAs, we offer the Tanzu Mission Control self-managed artifact in Customer Connect, and it is not gated by a support entitlement. So POCs, free trials are self-service in that anyone can go and access the download page that's available on the product page to download the artifact, use the installation documentation to get started. In order to run the solution in production and have any sort of SLA agreement, that's when the purchase will need to occur. But for just kind of testing and kicking the tires, anyone can go and grab that that installation artifact from VMware Customer Connect, which is the VMware portal for software downloads.
Yeah, we also have a hands-on. We also have a hands-on lab. I think the link is within the attachments. So that hands-on lab is probably going to guide you through SaaS deployments. And if you are, by any chance, interested in the SaaS deployment, we do have free trials also. So if you can talk to your VMware representative to start in a free trial of the SaaS version, or contact us through our product page.
Thanks, Carol. Yes, you'll notice it in the attachments tab. It's probably like 4 or 5, I think, on the bottom. But the hands-on lab, VMware Tanzu Mission Control, manage Kubernetes across clouds is what I click on, like Carol did mention. Another question here that we have is, do we get the same air gap feature from Tanzu Mission Control in Tanzu Application Platform?
So, I'm not sure I quite understand the question. So maybe if we could, if Ram, if you can provide some additional kind of clarity and a follow up, but I'll answer as best I can. There's a couple of ways to talk about this. First of all, we are working on an integration with TMC and TAP right now in general to support basically deployment of TAP via Tanzu Mission Control. So TMC is kind of the control plane for managing and deploying clusters. And we're also looking at making it kind of the single portal for managing Tanzu solutions in general. So right now, the first level of that integration is deploying TAP via SaaS, where TAP also requires connection to outbound public repositories to support that deployment. But the next phase of that integration is to support air gap deployments for TAP via TMC, which then will make the TMC self-managed integration a bit more relevant. So long-term, our roadmap is to support, that same air gap deployment model for TAP via TMC. Right now, if you take TMC out of the picture, TAP does support air gap deployments as well, not necessarily driven by Tanzu Mission Control, but our vision is to bring those two solutions together. And then I see there was another question. So now TMC will be available in air gap environment as well. Yes, that is the case. So this solution will be able to run and install in an environment that is truly air gap. So no inbound or outbound connectivity is required for installation or usage of the product.
Cool. And I think, Joe, you may have alluded to this from another question as well, as someone had asked, how does Tanzu Mission Control integrate with other VMware products? I think you touched on that a bit, but I don't know if you wanted to elaborate a little more on anything other than just TAP.
Yeah, so the main integrations, so to speak, are going to be with TKG directly. So being able to lifecycle manage TKG or Tanzu Kubernetes grid clusters. And then that kind of trickles down to, integration with the underlying vSphere and vSAN solution as well. So it's kind of a chain of dependencies from TMC all the way down through the infrastructure stack via TKG. That's kind of the main level of integration. And as we get more feedback and understand more about how our customers are actually using this, we can and we will kind of turn back on the other integrations with solutions like the TSM, Tanzu Service Mesh, and ARIA Observability for apps. Those SaaS service solutions that we've kind of turned the integrations off for in 1.0, we can easily re-enable those when we get feedback that customers are actually looking for that. And then, there may be, a situation down the road where we have kind of, package deployment models or features and functionality of Tanzu Service Mesh or ARIA Observability for ops that also start to surface in TMC self-manage.
Great, thank you. I think there's just one last question here that does Tanzu Mission Control package will be available offline for air-gapped environments?
Yes. Yeah. So the basic workflow is that a customer will go to VMware Customer Connect and download this installation artifact bundle. And so that bundle contains everything that is needed to deploy the solution. So no public VMware repositories or endpoints are accessed during the installation. It all happens within the air-gapped environment. So no need for any inbound or outbound connectivity for deployment or ongoing usage of the solution. So it can run in perpetuity in a completely air-gapped environment.
Great. It looks like those are all the questions that we had here today, and it's perfect timing. And we're about to get to the top of the hour. So I do want to, again, special thank you to Carol and to Joe for today's presentation. Any closing points you guys want to make before we close today's presentation?
Just thank you everyone for joining, and thanks for the questions. And, we're really excited from the VMware side to introduce this product. This is something that we know our customers have been asking for a very long time. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out directly on LinkedIn if you have any questions. We're happy and excited to hear and talk to our customers about how they're going to use this, how they're interested in using it to make sure we're improving the product as we go along.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you everybody for joining. And again, this is an announcement that we're really excited about. We want to hear from you if you're joining our VMware Explore conferences. We have one in Las Vegas coming up, another one in Europe, and also other locations. So come talk to our team about Tanzu offerings. We'll be there.
Excellent. Perfect segue there, Carol. I was just going to mention that VMware Explore and Spring One at Explore is taking place at the end of this month, August 21st and 24th in Las Vegas. And if you are somewhere in Europe, in the EMEA area, there's a VMware Explore taking place in Barcelona later this year. But if you do want to meet Carol and Joe in person, I believe you guys both will be at VMware Explore in Las Vegas. Is that right?
Right.
Yep.
Excellent. So if you want to reach out to them directly on LinkedIn to ask them questions, you can submit questions also here through this platform, or better yet, you can ask them in person if you see them in Las Vegas. So if you have yet to register for Explore, the link to register is in the attachments tab as well. So again, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Carol, for today's presentation. But most of all, thanks to all of you guys for joining us today. This has been recorded and will be available on demand shortly after the end of the presentation. And all the attachments that you see here below will also be in that email, in addition to the slides, so you don't have to hurry to download them now. So they will be available in the email. So again, thank you, Carol. Thank you, Joe. Have a great week, everybody. Bye all.
Thank you all.